What have you all done to me? Hey, it's Romania Black. So Yona's broke me. Not really. No, it's just after volume 34, which is incredibly emotional and explained all the things and tied everything together. I'm like, Kusanagi, you mad genius. I was told that I should probably go back and rewatch episodes 1, 2, and 6. Those were great decisions. Because as we get into this volume 35, I can't believe I'm nearly caught up with the series, which to be fair, I'm not nearly caught up. We still have, in the US, volumes 35, 36, and 37 is coming out in October, the official English translations, and then I've been told there's enough content up through volumes 38, 39, and 40. So we've still got some volumes to catch up. But I feel like now Kusanagi has really hit her stride and been like, okay, we've made it this far. You deserve answers. It's time to get them. And I don't think we're done with the answers. I don't. Volume 33 started out the answers. Volume 34 incorporated more answers. And I still think volume 35 is going to give us even more from that. Or volume 35 is, but we're not there yet. And I feel like I need to go over this. I talked for like an hour with volume 34 and I wasn't satisfied with it. I felt like my thoughts were scattered. And so thankfully, Be Happy, Algum, Kix K, a bunch of people have been giving some really, really good comments that I was like, okay, thank you. Those of you on Patreon and YouTube that have been giving comments, thank you, because they've helped me sort out my thoughts. And I feel a lot, now that I've just gotten it written out on whiteboard, Kuhn, I feel a lot better going into volume 35. But we're just going to run through this real quick. So if y'all, and whiteboard Kuhn's having some little tipsy problems here, but we're going to go back and just show y'all what we've gotten out of this. So rewatching episodes 1, 2, and 6, what a trip. Like, I'm so glad. It felt so good to hear Yona and Hak in them again. I've missed their voices. It makes me mad because we don't have a second season. Get on that, anime team. I don't know what you're waiting on. The content is here. It's right for the picking. But anyway, so just going through this, there's so much more that made sense. But I wanted to bring up Kix and Be Happy's comments because I thought they were pretty important. Because we have our 4 main players, the 2 sets of parents, Yona and Soo-won's parents. We have Il and Kashi and Yuhan and Yanhee. And their horrifically tragic backstory that only at the end, when we get here, I'm glad that it's Yona who knows, and she's kind of this in-between, but we have our 4 main players here, and I can't decide if I need to talk about the episodes and then go back to them. I guess I'll talk about the episodes. Episode 1, Soo-won visiting Yona after her mother's death. Time back to volume 34. And the idea that when Soo-won sees her and she's crying about her mom's death, he takes his robe and like puts it over her and like wraps it around her and like hugs her to let her like be comforted. I want Yona to do that to Soo-won because this boy needs to grieve. Soo-won needs to grieve. This boy has not cried. He's not been given time to grieve. He hasn't been like given the opportunity to like process and like weep for his parents, weep for all the things that have happened. He's not given that opportunity. So I want Yona, I know she's comforted him, but I want him to be able to cry. Like him to just be able to like let it all out. Because now Yona and Hak are back in his life. They're not dead like he thought they were. So, and there's a very real possibility that Yona's going to be like, you're going to have to keep us in your life. Like, this is not going to work. We've seen that it doesn't work. This whole isolation thing. So that part was interesting. And that kind of ties into Soo-won. I've never really shipped Soo-won and Yona, and you all know this. I'm very much a Hak-Yona shipper or a Hak-Soo-won shipper. But in the triangle, I just never could get behind Yona and Soo-won being romantically involved. And I think that episode 1 kind of backs me up because Soo-won, he sees Yona suffering, and he's like, well, I want to take the place of your mother. I want to take the place of someone that comforts you, that gives you solace, right? That's there for you to wipe away your tears. And it's so sweet when he tells her that as a kid. And then when she like comes at him in episode 1, she's like, I love you. He's like, I don't want to view you like a woman because that's not how he views her, right? He doesn't want to do that. And it's not only because of the fact that he views her like in a more like older sibling parental way, but also because viewing her as a woman is going to complicate his whole plan to kill King Il. So, but I like the idea of Soo-won being like the parent to Yona, or being like a big brother and wanting to comfort her and protect her like her mom did. I like that, which is ironic because then it's Kashi, right? Also, there's hints that Soo-won's headaches start when Yona confronts him about loving him. His headaches begin, so it was even starting like back, which I wonder, we haven't gotten the ill Soo-won conversation yet from the flashback. We haven't gotten to that point yet, or if we're ever going to tie back to it. I hope we do. I think we will. But I'm wondering if Soo-won was aware that he was starting to show symptoms when he killed Il, and that kind of expedited the process. Obviously, I think that Coco was in danger of being attacked by Kai, and that's what led him to make the ultimate decision to kill King Il. But I wonder if the headaches had any play on that, or if it's just kind of coincidental that it's happening around the same time. Il's distrust of Soo-won, that all makes sense now. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Soo-won wanted to keep Yona distant when he came to kill King Il. He wanted to keep her away because, again, her and Hak are his weakness. His love for them keeps him from getting the main objective out of the way. And I'm like, yes, you need Hak and Yona, whether you realize it or not, Soo-won, you need them. So, and then everyone, like, rewatching episode 1, it was like, man, everybody was in on it. Kishuk, the guards, everybody knew that Soo-won was there to kill King Il. And it all makes sense now that nobody was going to stop him. It all makes sense. But man, so episode 2, going back to that, when Yona's like, how could you do this? And Soo-won's like, I've lived for this day. It's like, yeah, he's lived for this day for like 10 years. He has lived for that moment. And he says that he loved Il until Il killed his father. And then from there, and it's the saddest thing because Yeon-hee couldn't reach him at that point. At that point, he loved and respected his father so much that when he died, he just turned all of his vengeance towards Il. It was like, he's like, I'll give him a chance, but I'm going to kill him. And you could tell the other men that were Yuhan's men were influencing him. He just very much was a product of his environment at that point. Right? And so he's like, I was wrong. Il killed Yuhan, and he was not. He's like, I was wrong to love Il. And it's like, no, you weren't. And it's like, damn it. And so I'm hoping, again, Yona comes through and talks to him now that she knows all of this, right? Here's the thing. Yona now knows both sides of the story. She now knows the full picture of what was going on. She has the full version. Soo-won only has, even now, one side of the story. He didn't read his mother's journal. He doesn't know from Il, unless there's something in that conversation we don't know about before Il died. He doesn't know anything. He only knows one side of the story, Soo-won does. He doesn't have the full picture. And that's what Yona, I'm hoping, will be able to share with him and share with Hak. Yuhan. The idea is given that Yuhan, he didn't care for the throne. He only wanted to protect Koka. And that has kind of genetically passed down to Soo-won. Soo-won doesn't care about being king necessarily. He just knows that being king will allow him to protect Koka. And that's why he goes through with killing Il to become king. That all makes sense. To avenge his father and honor his final wish to keep Koka safe. For those he cares about, which is ironic because those he cares about, he has to discard, which is the ultimate irony in all of this. Now, rewatching episode 2, he did move to kill Yona. He did. Kishuk's like, you've got to get rid of her. And he did take a step forward. He didn't say, no, I'm not going to kill her. He took a step forward with the sword like he was going to kill her. And then her guards, he didn't stop the guards from trying to kill her either. He had accepted that this was the only way for the mission to go through. And that's the tragedy of it, right? And I hope that Yona addresses, she's like, I know what you were trying to do, but she's like, it didn't have to be that way, right? But he was so convinced that the only way to get his objective was to cast aside those that he cared about to get it accomplished. And it's like, that's the saddest thing, right? The saddest thing. And so the whole thing about Soo-won confirming that he was as cold as he was with Yuhan. The whole thing, like just that confirmation, and Soo-won indifferent to those in his way. That's the thing. Soo-won is detached and indifferent, and he can be as cold as Yuhan was. That's the sad thing, that he could be that detached from emotions and caring about people to get the objective completed, right? So then we go to episode 6, which was great. I'm glad y'all told me to rewatch episode 6. Soo-won, he was trying to get in contact with Yona and Hak. When he found out they left the mansion, he was trying to get back in contact with them. Now, whether he would imprison them, whether he would talk to them, whether he would kill them, we don't know. But he was trying to get in contact. He didn't immediately want to kill them when Taejun says they fell off the cliff. And then we have Soo-won holding the hair. And that scene's so tragic because he's holding the hair thinking that they're dead. And, you know, part of him, you know, we tie to Yeon-hee and her guilt. Part of it's like Soo-won is a product of both his mother and his father, so he has all these traits from Yoo-han. I'd say he's more Yoo-han than Yeon-hee, but that guilt that she had about everything, you almost feel like Soo-won felt guilty in that moment, like, I killed them. It's my fault that they're dead. And now all I have to do is carry through with the mission, like I was going to anyway. And so I like that in the bath scene where he's in the water talking to Ki-shuk, he knew that Hak had cut ties with the Wind Tribe to save them, because Ki-shuk mentions having the new general, and he's like, oh, well, somebody would have had to cut ties to make sure that happened. He knew. He knew. And then there's the whole thing of him, like, crying on Hak's shoulder, like, right before he kills King Il. And the thing of it is, Soo-won wants Hak. Hak wants him to marry Yona so that he can be by his side and be his right-hand man, and he wants him to become king so that he can have Hak as his bodyguard. But then Soo-won doesn't really want to marry Yona. He's like, oh, I can't marry Yona. And whether or not it's that he doesn't want to marry Yona or that he knows he literally can't because he's going to kill King Il, regardless, it's like he wants Hak to be by his side, and Hak's like, well, okay, we can make that work. You just have to marry Yona. And he's like, that's a dream. That's the dream, right? And I'm like, it doesn't have to be a dream. It could be real. If you listen to Yona and work with Hak, it could be real. It doesn't have to be a pipe dream. Not necessarily, not now, not after everything that's happened. That's the ultimate irony of all this, is that because of everything he's done, he thinks that he's destroyed his relationships with Yona and Hak. But I'm like, no, in the oddest turn of events, because of what you've done, Soo-won, you've enabled Yona to grow in a way that she now has the capability to be a queen. She now has the capability to protect her people, and she could work with you. That's the ultimate, like, the miracle in all of this, right? And Hak's going to be the one to reach. Like, Yona seems like she is apt to work with Soo-won at this point because she knows the truth. Hak's going to be the one that's going to be hard-headed and hard to turn over. But I think if anybody can do it, it's going to be Yona. So there's that. But yeah. So Hak, he tells him that he's the only one that could become king, and says that he'll be Soo-won's right arm. Again, that's kind of going back to the last volume, like, is Hak the sword and Yona the shield, and Soo-won is the king? Could that be it? He says he'll stand by him and Yona until they die. And I fully believe that. I think Hak would stay by Yona's side until she dies. I wonder if it's foreshadowing that if Soo-won does die, that Hak's going to be by his side until the very end. I will cry so hard if that happens. Nope, don't want to think about it. Not going to happen. Sunshines and rainbows. Don't have to worry about it. But yeah. And then Soo-won tells Hak to protect Yona. He's like, protect Yona. Like Kashi did. Like, everybody's trying to tell Hak to protect Yona, and Hak's like, I know. Right? But that's so crazy. And Soo-won, in that flashback, he expected to be alone as a king. He knew that what he was going to do to Il was going to shatter the bonds that he had with Hak and Yona. But it's the only thing he knew to do. And he's like, my right arm is gone. Like, when he's about to go in for his coronation ceremony, he's like, my right arm is gone, and the girl who gave me warmth is gone. And he's like, I crushed them underfoot and cast them aside to get here. And so, yeah, he's self-aware, and it's the most tragic thing in the world, right? Because without him, he says he won't doubt himself. He'll move forward and be able to do what he needs to do. But it's like, without them, he's soulless, right? It's like the heart has been crushed and ripped from him. So, also, Iksu knew Yona without her saying anything. But Iksu's a priest, so he, like Kashi and like the Grand Priest, they had that foresight that he knew it was Yona. Also, my headcanon is that, however, we didn't see exactly how Iksu was saved. I'm assuming we'll eventually find that out, maybe. But I'm assuming that Kashi was related to Iksu getting rescued, and she probably told him all about Yona and the plan and how she'd eventually come to him with someone protecting her, it being the Thunder Beast, and so he put two and two together. And he has that divine foresight. So there you go. And he was happy to see her. And when he's crying, when Iksu's crying, I immediately thought of the priest that went to the village of Yeon-hee. the priest that went to Yanhee's village and was like, I'm just so happy to see you all here. You've all suffered so much, and I just wanted to say thank you. Like, Iksu's attitude was exactly like that priest. He was so happy to see Yona. So at the end of the day, so we got our 4 players, right? Yanhee, Il, Yuhan, and Kashi, and then Soo-won's got his own bubble down here that we had from last volume. And be happy and Kixk, like, your comments were so good. If you're on Patreon, if you're a patron, go read their comments. They're like amazing. They're like all I wanted to say and spent an hour trying to say. And I was like, yep, that's exactly what I wanted to say. Couldn't have said it better myself. But yeah, so Yanhee, her whole representation is guilt. She feels guilt for her family, for the priests that were killed, for the fact that her husband lost the throne, for the fact that she was responsible in part for Kashi's death, for the fact that she had the inability to reach her son. She felt all this guilt because nothing ever worked out, and she was the catalyst for all the bad that happened in volume 34. The irony is that while she was the catalyst for everything bad that happened, she inadvertently, through her death and through her writing, has possibly become the catalyst for everything maybe turning itself around. We don't know, we'll see, right? So that's kind of the irony with Yanhee, is that she's the most I think that Yanhee is the most tragic figure in the story right now, with the exception of maybe Soo-won. I think she's the most tragic alongside Soo-won, but I think that that's kind of the irony, is that she is such a tragic character, but in the end, she's going to be such like an important character in the story for doing what she did and writing everything down, and for Yona reading it. Then you have Il, who is a fanatic, had an inferiority complex and a jealous factor towards his brother, that he still loved Yuhan, but he could never find a way to get over those differences that he and his brother possessed. And then he loved Kashi and Yona. He was self-aware that he was a coward and that he was untrusting of people. That was the problem. He was on the polar opposite extreme from Yuhan and Soo-won, where he had no faith in people. He had no trust or faith in people. He could only and that, makes sense at the end of the day. If you have no trust towards people, all you can rely on is faith in something else. And for him, it was faith in the gods. He's like, I can't trust people. They betray me. I can't trust myself as a person because I can never say what I need to say, and I'm constantly filled with regret, and I'm a coward. So he turned his faith to the only thing he could think of. And so that's tragic, but what makes it worse with Il is his inactivity. The fact that he went bravely to his death, which there's a part of me that's like, man, he knew for years that Soo-won was going to kill him, and he didn't try to kill Soo-won. After he killed his brother, he's like, that's the only person I'm ever going to kill, and that's it. No more. And there's something nice about that he didn't try to kill Soo-won all those times, because he was a kid. It would have been easy. After Yuhan died, I mean, Soo-won was only 9 years old. He still could have killed him, but he didn't. But there's a part of that you're kind of like, okay, yeah, good on you, Il. But then there's another part that's like, he became a slave to his faith and a slave to fate, where he was so convinced that there was just no way around it that he's like, I'll just let it happen. And that's the problem. He was so inactive. I think Kixk pointed this out. He was just inactive. He didn't do anything. He didn't try to teach Yona self-defense, knowing that he was going to die and she was going to be put in a bad corner. He just relied that Hak will protect her. It'll be fine. Didn't teach her anything. Wouldn't let her use weapons. Didn't help the people in his kingdom. He just became inactive and is like, I'm just a placeholder. And yeah, it's great that you're aware that you're a coward and that you're not the king that should be there. It's great he was self-aware, but at the same time, even if you're a placeholder, do something. And he didn't do anything. So that was Il's biggest faults, is that he just didn't do anything and was a coward. He was a bad king. He had a lot of reasons for what he did, but at the end of the day, he didn't do anything to stop the trajectory of what was going to happen to him. He didn't stop his own death. He was inadvertently the cause of his own death, which that's the funny thing, is that he was inadvertently the cause of his own death, and so was Yuhan. Yuhan caused his own death in the most inadvertent way, because Yuhan's interesting, so deeply passionate, but to a fault. He's so deeply passionate and narrow-minded. He could not see the views of anyone else but what he saw for himself. Like the priests, he saw them as a threat, and he could not see past that, to the point where even Yanhee for a while kind of believed him. She was like, yeah, you're right. And then she realized when she saw the full picture that, oh no, we didn't understand them and we made a boo-boo. We should not have killed them. Because I think, honestly, I mean, King Il, he kept the trajectory going for his own death, but Yuhan, he caused his own death. Like, the moment he killed the priests, that sealed the deal, because him killing the priests caused Il to have even more disrespect for his brother, because he like nearly killed Kashi, and then caused that hatred to fester, and then him knowing that his brother's a liar, and then again, Yuhan, he just couldn't, he was ruthless and unwilling to concede in his beliefs. And that was at the expense of the priests and the expense of Kashi, because he thought that he was willing to go at the expense of others any means to protect the people he cared about, which were Soo-won and Yeon-hee. And he was even willing to kill his own sister-in-law because he thought that it would threaten his wife's life, even though it didn't. Like, he just couldn't see the full picture and was just acting on what he thought was the right thing to do, but he wasn't able to look at it from a full perspective. And so, yeah, it's like Il and Yuhan, they both have really good attributes about themselves, but then really bad attributes, right? And so they're kind of balanced out. It's the weirdest thing. And then you have Kashi, who just wanted to make sure that her daughter was safe, that Hak and the dragons be able to protect her, and that she didn't, her saddest attribute is that she didn't realize that Il loved her. She just thought she was being used as a priestess to have Yona, who was, you know, the reincarnation of the Crimson Dragon King. And we don't find out until we read Il's note that he did love her. He just wasn't able to talk. He wasn't good at communication, and he wasn't good at compromise. He wasn't good at communicating to others his true feelings, and he distrusted everyone. He was not able to compromise and understand others at the expense of the people he cared about. So it's like a double-edged sword of bad. And it just ended horribly, right? So then we have Soo-won. Soo-won, tasked with his father's will and the influence to carry on his father's ideals and his goals, and the power of the people, and strengthening Kwoka as king, which is good. I do like Soo-won in that he believes in the power of the people, and he doesn't rely on gods. He doesn't want to exploit the dragons. Like, I love all that about Soo-won. But he's so desensitized to violence. Like, and that comes from Yuhan taking him to all those military strategy meetings from the age of 3. Like, just, and telling Soo-won, this is how it has to be. Sometimes you have to do things you don't want to, and people have to die in order to save the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Which is ironic which is such irony, because Yuhan was willing to sacrifice the needs of the many to save Yeon-hee, and he was willing to, he wanted to protect his kingdom, but he was willing to kill all these people to protect one person, right? And that's so crazy. But yeah, Soo-won, he was desensitized to violence, thinks of it as duty, taught to be calm and collected for a mission, and connecting to others can be a weakness. And as is, despite how he feels inside, like, he wants to be near Yona and Hak. He wants to be with them, but he feels like that is going to jeopardize his whole main objective. But this boy just needs to grieve. He just needs to sob, to cry it out. Let this boy cry. He's been through a lot. Let him cry it out. He's surrounded by men who put him on a pedestal as Yuhan's heir. And that was another cool thing that the Kicks pointed out, was that all these people put Soo-won on an heir as like either the king or Yuhan's heir, or like the person that's taking the reins from his father, and blah, blah, blah. Hak and Yona only ever saw him as himself, as Soo-won. And so he needs Hak and Yona because they view him as a person and not as anything different. And so that's the sad thing. And he believes he has to do things alone. And it's like, no, you really don't. You really don't. And I want Yona to talk about that. And the fact at the end of the day is that Soo-won, he is kind. He is a kind-hearted person. And he's caring. But he's also so driven to do what he feels is right, no matter the cost. That cost is sometimes people that care about you. And he can so easily detach. That's his biggest fault, is that he can so easily detach from others. I'm like, dude, you don't need to be alone. Especially like in his condition. He doesn't need to be alone. And I feel like Yona's at that point where she's like, nope, not having this. So yeah, she's gone in to take his place at the throne. My big thing is, I'm not worried about Yona and Soo-won at this point. I feel like Yona has read the journals. She's read her father's words. She's in a place of zen. Girl knows what to do. She just needs to communicate all of that to Soo-won. And then Hak is going to be our biggest hurdle. because Hak is so emotional. And unlike Soo-won, Hak is the polar opposite. Soo-won can easily detach, but once Hak is latched onto someone, he ain't letting go. He is literally a hawk. He is literally Gulfin's father. That once he's like attached to him, he ain't letting go. Right? Whereas Soo-won's the polar opposite. He can easily let go. So I feel better. I feel better. That only took me 25 minutes to get through, but you know what? It was necessary. I feel like it was absolutely necessary to do before we start this volume 35. So thank you for humoring me. I feel much better. So yeah. So now that we've done that, we're gonna read volume 35. The only other comment I had was Algum noted that Soo-won and Awa, when he shielded Yona with the cloak, was a very similar move to what Yuhan did with Yeonhee. And I was like, oh, like father, like son, look at him. So yeah, I feel much better. All right. So we're going to start volume 35. Y'all have been patient enough. And we are going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and... Oh my gosh, what a cliffhanger. You know what? It feels good to have Yona back. It feels good to have Yona of the Dawn like back on its train of being hilarious, of being romantic, of being suspenseful, of being just bonkers. I'm here for it. This volume was like a weight off my shoulders. I was like, okay, good. Not that I didn't love volumes 33 and 34 and volume 32. Those 3 volumes were great. Angsty as all get out. Like, what I love about Yona is that Kusanagi does this really nice blend of angst and sadness, but also of comedy and of romance, and it's just like a really nice blend. But the last several volumes have been really tragic, as they needed to be to show us how we got to this place. So it makes sense that it was like that for a reason. But man, I'm glad we're back to Yona, and oh my god, Kusanagi. Kusanagi's like, I made you all suffer through those volumes. Let me reward you. I can't thank you all enough for not spoiling me, because there's things that have come out in this volume that I was like, I know I talked about that, and y'all didn't say anything. Y'all were like, sure, I don't know. And I'm so glad you didn't spoil it, because man, that moment with Hak and Soo-won and Yona. Okay. So I had to bring Whiteboard Kun out because, yeah, we got things to talk about. I'm probably going to be taking snapshots as we go through. God, yeah. So it's funny. We get this idea that South Kai is corrupt, right? And South Kai is, they're closest to Shishin. They're nearest, but which North Kai is seemingly corrupt as well. But we got the idea here that South Kai, the aristocrats are corrupt. Which, it's funny. It's really funny throughout all of this that we have this parallel, right? So it seems like Chagel is the emperor. We have Emperor Chagel. And I'm going to compare him right here to Il, to the former king, right? I'm going to compare them a little bit here because I was noticing when Nyan-nyan, whatever her name is, Nyan-nyan, when she was talking to Soo-won, the idea that Emperor Chagel and then King Il, they're both two rulers that do not seem like Rontan kind of lamented that Chagel's corrupt and he doesn't need to be in power anymore. And a lot of people said that Il was a coward and a weak king, so he didn't need to be in power anymore. So it seems, oddly enough, that the two people that are kind of trying to dispatch of this corruption, you have Nyan-nyan, whose squirrel-like companion has, of course, become canoodling with Ow. I hope it's a boy. I hope it's a boy squirrel and that they're canoodling. And then and we have tiny little Ow babies. And then we have Soo-won. So you have these two descendants of the Crimson Dragon King that are trying to help overthrow, it seems. Because she's worked her way up. She was a general that worked her way up to be a concubine. Like, okay. But what I like about that is that I was talking a few volumes ago, it might have even been last volume, and Hug is like, eating the carpet, is digging at the carpet. But I talked maybe last volume or the volume before about the idea that, well, they have this village that Soo-won's mom descended from, all the Crimson Dragon blood, the king's blood. Why couldn't there be other descendants? There could be, and she's one of them. So she managed to work her way. She said her father and brother left the tribe and ended up in Kai. They're near the border. That's not surprising. So they ended up over there, and she's worked her way up just kind of like Soo-won has. But the funny thing about it is that she is, in her situation, she is angry that she doesn't have the power of the dragon warriors. She wants the dragons and that divine power that she considers to be her birthright, right? And I realize this marker is not going to last much longer. Whereas Soo-won, he kind of wants things for himself. He wants to do things by himself. He doesn't want the power of the dragons, doesn't care about it, could care less. He sees, it's funny that she is what I think ill feared would happen. She comes in and is like, I want the powers of the dragons for myself. Why does Yona get to have it? That's not fair. And she wants to get rid of Yona and rule the kingdom. And I think that's what Il was afraid Soo-won would be like. I think Il was afraid that Soo-won would want to overthrow Yona and take the dragons for himself. But the funny thing is that Soo-won, luckily, in the weirdest way possible, Yuhan instilled that disregard for the divine. In the biggest twist of fate, King Il's brother that he couldn't understand, couldn't talk to, instilled in Soo-won this idea that he doesn't need the dragons or gods. He can do things on his own. And so, honestly, his Yuhan, I think, saved Yona's life inadvertently, right? In the craziest of roundabout ways, Yuhan's kind of responsible for Yona not being dead because he's not like Nyan-nyan. He doesn't want to secure the power of the throne and the dragons by killing Yona. That's not how he works. So, and you can't say that it's because he likes Yona, because as we've seen, Soo-won, he can disregard and detach from people, and that's not the deal. But he's like, I don't see the point in having the dragons. They're not something I need. So it's not the fact that he likes Yona that is why he disregards her offer. It's because he just doesn't see the point. He's like, I don't want to have the dragons under my wing. I don't need them. I love that. I love that we have Nyan-nyan and Soo-won. And of course, I'm going to go ahead and say what's going to happen. Nyan-nyan and Soo-won, they both love Hak. Everybody loves Hak. Hak has a harem. You go into this anime and this manga thinking that Yona is going to be the woman that has all of the people beside her in a harem. No, it's Hak's harem. This entire series is Hak's harem. I'm just going to go ahead and say that she's going to love Hak. I'm just going to go ahead and say that she's going to love him. Just go ahead and predict that. And then she's going to find out that Hak loves Yona, and it's going to be like, oh, this is the person you care about. I see. Now, one thing I am sad about, and we don't get to see, one thing I am sad about is I thought, going into the final chapters of this volume, I thought Soo-won was late to the funeral because he'd gone to see Hak. I know that that's not the case, and it was like a pipe dream. I was just thinking, and I was like, well, wait, because Hak and Soo-won need to have a conversation. They just need to talk. And this is the best time for Soo-won to talk to Hak. Hak's in a cell. Yeah, he could break out, but he probably isn't going to. Because Yona's told him to stay put, and he knows it's for his own good and to keep Yona happy that he stays there and get tended on by Yoon. So, you know, Hak's just going to do infinite amount of crunches, over 6,000 of them, because what else does he have to do except strengthen himself? But yeah, I have a feeling she's going to fall for Hak and then realize that Yona has it all. She not only he's the Thunder Beast, she gets the dragon, she gets the throne, she gets everything. She's going to be really jealous of Yona. Nyan-nyan's interesting. She's interesting. I don't hate her character. I find her character fascinating, especially in regards to her having the same sickness as Yuhan, and especially how Yona frames her. Yona frames her. We need to talk about that real quick before we dive into this. Yona frames Nyan-nyan like Yeon-hee. She's like, she's suffering just like your mother did. I was like, that is a bold card to play, Yona. That is a bold card to play. I was like, holy shit. She's like, I ain't above it. I'm going to go ahead and say it. So now Soo-won knows that Yona knows stuff about Yeon-hee. So I'm wondering if he's ever going to question her about that. But yeah, the whole idea of one-sided affection. Talk about this. Oh my gosh, the chapter titles. I'm glad I don't read the chapter titles because they would have been a dead giveaway on some of this. Like, and some of this you don't realize till afterwards. You're like, a venomous guest is Maignan. Maignan could have killed Rantan for all we know. She could have poisoned him if we're gonna give her like a poison connection. But yeah, so let's talk about this. This is great. So Yona. Talk about what Yona does in this. Our girl Yona does a lot. So she schools the South Kai envoys. She schools them. She's like, I've spent the last 3 days hoarded up learning about all this stuff and I'm doing my quiz now. But of course these guys are diplomats, but they don't know all the legalese, right? Rantan says it's corrupt, so why would they? So she knows the laws that they don't even know. And it's interesting because it's announced that Junam put most of these laws into place. So her grandfather put the laws into place. I'm just going to put up here that Junam put hundreds of articles in place. Showing, for a split second, I was like, look, Kishuk gets a little bit, Kishuk's like, this young lady, she can know things. She has a brain. And it's like, yes, Yona's tiny lady brain has been cramming for the last 3 days and girl knows her stuff. I'm like, I love Yona in this position. And her hair's like kind of droopy because it's getting longer. She looks definitely more like Kiryu, which is interesting, right? She definitely looks more, like especially in the shot where she gives Kishuk the side eye and she's like, and when he brings up the dragons instead of her and she's like, she looks a lot like Kiryu in that image, which is fascinating. But yeah, but she starts to win everybody over, even Kishuk. And I'm like, oh, I love it. But yeah, they talk about this lake, right? The lake, they talk about a lake in Shinsui, which is curious. So I'm going to put over here in South Kai, this lake Shinsui, that supposedly its waters have divine properties. Now, could we take Soo-won to the divine lake and heal him, perhaps? Or I don't know, maybe there's something to that. And she's like, well, if they have divine properties, then why didn't you guys all drink from the water? And she kind of insults them. She's like, explains your godlike appearances. And Judo and Kishuk are trying not to smile. And they're like, oh, well, it's only a legend. Likewise, the dragons are a legend of Koka. So I like the idea that maybe South Kai has its own legends that are tied to the dragons. That's kind of interesting that they have their own, that they were once, and they say that during the Age of Myths, the Kai Empire and Koka were of one vast nation. So at one point, South Kai was connected with Koka. So there may be something to it. Now, the whole thing with Hiryu Palace, that's a long way from, and they put like Shinsui on the map. So it's curious that it's so far away from the palace. Like, what's the deal? Is it kind of like two ends of a magnet that the dragons have to go they have to be either one end or the other and they're weak in the middle? I don't know. It's curious though, but maybe the lake is connected some way into the way that we can heal Soo-won. It would be interesting if the only way to save Soo-won is for the dragons to accompany Yona and take him to the lake. But by taking him to the lake, they're going to lose their powers because they're so far away. That would be interesting, that they could possibly lose their powers and become, just regular mortals, maybe, if they take Soo-won, and that maybe that could solve the whole Crimson. Maybe that's the way to cure everything, is to go there to this divine place and do something, and the dragons will lose their powers and Soo-won will live, and then the myth is just a myth. That would be interesting. I wouldn't be opposed to that. I think it would be a cool narrative thing that the dragons have to basically give up their powers to save the king, to save the descendant of Hiryu, who's not the Crimson Dragon King. That could be interesting. If they have to sacrifice their powers to save someone that's not their reincarnation. But I don't know. I don't know how that'll work. I don't know how that's going to go. I guess we'll find out, right? But I thought that was really interesting. So we'll just put a pin on Lake Shinsui and just like lock it away for now. Don't spoil me. And we'll see where it goes to. But I thought that was rather interesting. I'm excited that as we're getting closer to catching up with the manga, I won't have to worry about spoilers as much. It'll just be the spoilers that you all get to see before I read the volume. So there's that. But yeah, so they talk about this, and Yona has their attention. She's completely captured their attention. And Ki-shuk notes that Yona has their attention. I feel bad for Rantan. I do. Because I feel bad for him because he was set up to die from the start. Like whether they were received by Yona or were received by Soo-won, it wasn't going to matter. They were going to kill this guy, this envoy, no matter what happened, and they were going to blame it on either Soo-won or Yona as a way to get the war expedited. That's the sad thing, is that he seems like a decent person, so of course he's the one that they target. And so he ends up going away, and I love that he throws up on Yona, and she's like, no, it's fine, it's okay. And she ends up seeing him and talks to him about things, and he says it was nerves, but I'm like, oh, you poor dude. And their conversation they have is really interesting because he talks about how South Kai is corrupt and how they have all these problems. And Yona's like, wow, that sounds eerily familiar. Sounds a lot like the problems that we have here. But he asks if her and Soo-won are married, and she's like, no. And she seems to be able to read him that he's a nice person. And he's like, I'd heard dark rumors about slavery and drugs like you mentioned. And she's like, why are you telling me this? And he's like, well, you may be an enemy princess, but I feel like you'll listen to what I say and how I feel. And he's like, what am I saying? Honestly, I'm tired. So she's gathered their attention. Like Yona has this ability to like make people open up to her and like her. And it's, you know, whether it's the Crimson Dragon King or whether it's just Yona being Yona, it's interesting that even someone like him, like Rantan, opens up to her. And so then he asks her, he like finds her so kind, and he's like, are you betrothed to Soo-won? She says, no. And he says, do you have a paramour? Which is like, you have a lover, right? So the idea of a paramour, which I rather like. I like this phrase that way. Do you have a paramour? And she says, I do. She says she does. And he's like, oh, I see. And she's like, oh, no, I don't. And he's like, well, which is it? And then she's like, what are Hak and I? Well, you're not just friends, because just friends don't make out in jail cells. That's for sure. So she's like, what are we? And he's like, huh. And he's like, there's someone that you care for. So anyone you've given your heart to must be a wonderful person. And in that moment, Yona's like, I don't know when I'll be able to see him again. And she's like, and I goofed and asked Jaha to tell him not to make me my bodyguard. But I'm like, girl, I'm glad Hak reacted the way that he did. He was like, so? I love the Hak's like, he saw right through it. And I was like, good, Kusanagi, none of that drama bullshit. He was like, no. I just love that Hak totally sees through it. It's great. But yeah, but Ki-shuk finding Yona to be competent and saying that he's like, Soo-won, I love that he's like, and Yona kind of figures out, I'm going through this manga as I'm talking to y'all, she knows Ki-shuk better from the journal. I like that she says I should still be wary of him because it's been a long time since Yan he wrote that stuff. So times change, people can change. She's like, I should still be wary of him. But she's like, what I once thought was creepy and mysterious, it's shown me how his mind works, and he's no longer just that. I love that because that's that understanding, right? That is that understanding. That's what Yan-hee and Yuhan didn't get with the priests when they first met them. And that's what led to them being executed, was that Yuhan couldn't understand the priests. He thought they were mysterious and ominous, and Yan-hee thought they were creepy. And so when they were executed, you didn't know until after the fact that no, that wasn't the case. That's not really how they were. And Yona's kind of figuring out, she's like, I didn't understand Ki-shuk and I thought he was creepy and mysterious, but I get him more now and I see where he's coming from. And it's like, Kusanagi, just bring all them themes together. And so she's like, he has someone that he wants to protect. And now she knows that he wants to protect Soo-won as well. And Ki-shuk is worried. He's like, if he doesn't recover, we'll... And he says, Ki-shuk's interesting because he says, I'm going to put Ki-shuk over here. Just real quick. Because at first, he's worried for Soo-won and the throne. He's worried about there not being a successor. And then he's like, no. And he talks himself out of it. He's like, no, let's not worry about finding a successor. King Soo-won is the only one that can carry out Lord Yuhan's wishes. We have to find a cure. But then he ties to, we need to find a cure for Soo-won. So I like that there's a moment where Ki-shuk hesitates and he's like, should we find another heir? And he's like, no. And he's like, no, I'm loyal to Soo-won. And it's like, good on you, Ki-shuk. He has a really good moment later in this. Ki-shuk has his best moment in the whole series later on in this, so that's fun. But, man, they actually show a damn dead body. I didn't think we'd see it, but I shouldn't be surprised. But Rantan, he just died from the poisoning. Yep. And they all look surprised, but I'm betting it was Nyan-nyan that poisoned him. I'm going to bet. And they all blame Yona for poisoning him. It was all just an act to get someone blamed so they could start a war with against South Kai, right? And Yona keeps asking, will there be a war? She's like, will there really be a war? She wants to avoid war. Like, there is a significant difference between Yona and Il. Il wanted peace, but he was not afraid to do anything about it. He wanted peace, but he was inactive. He didn't want to take the actions necessary to keep that peace, but he's not wrong in wanting there to be peace and realizing the horrors of war. Like, he didn't want Yuan to be king because he knew there'd just be tons of war and death and destruction. He didn't want that. And Yona's kind of the same way. It's funny how Soo-won and Yona are both very much influenced by their father's upbringing, right? You have Soo-won, who was, we'll put Soo-won over here. We might as well just add him to the fray and all this. Might as well. We'll put Soo-won. We'll put Soo-won here, I guess. All right. You have Soo-won, and we'll talk about him. But in the case of Soo-won, his father raised him from a young age to go and see military exercises, to get kind of desensitized to the violence, to realize its purpose and how it's used in war, and to become a military strategist. Like, he taught Soo-won that from a young age. And it's impacted how Soo-won views things. He thinks of things in a very pragmatic, this is just what we have to do, and he detaches himself from emotion and empathy. Whereas Yona, her father raised her to not see violence at all. So the violence does affect her. She does feel empathy, and she is harrowed by it. So even though it's good that she's been able to go out and see the world and see things, at the end of the day, that core value that she has of viewing people and understanding them and being peaceful with them, I think it's something that King Il kind of had a hand in instilling in her. And her being away from that violence, yeah, it sucks because she didn't know how to defend herself. That is a bad thing. But her not being around all that violence enables her to understand just how wrong it is. And I do appreciate that, right? She does not want to go to war. And she's like, that boy Rantan that died, that man, he hadn't done anything wrong. It was a needless death. So we come back to Yoon, and Yoon hears about Yona supposedly being murdered. I love that Jae-ha just sneaking around in that outfit all day, every day. Let's do it. I love also how at the end of chapter 199, Hak is so like, Yona a murderer? Okay, sure, Jan. Hak's face is the most sure Jan. I'm going to get a picture of that. It's the most sure Jan image of the entire manga so far. Hak just being like, yeah, no. I don't believe that's happening. And so then chapter 200, Now or Never, Hak slowly starts to piece things together. We're going to put Hak in here too. We're going to make our trifecta over here. Hak is piecing together the truth. He's piecing it all together. What's going on? And Jae-ha, meanwhile, is telling Yoon, we need to figure some stuff out. And I like that Yoon does not let on that it's Jae-ha. Yoon's like, okay, he's like, come on, boy, let's go take care of this. But then I thought that Jae-ha was about to get in trouble with a soldier, but it's Hak. It's Hak dressed up with the helmet. He took a page from Quellbo. Look at him. I love the idea that Hak, he learned from Quellbo. Look at him. He learned how to sneak in unsuspecting in his soldier gear. I'm like, it's great. But I love that he's like, okay, what is up? What is going on? And he's like, what's happening? And Jae-ha's like, I can't really tell him or Yoon. So him or Yoon don't really know, right? And so Hawk's like, I want you to tell me what's up. And Hawk is like, well, she said she can't come and see us because of stuff going on. Hawk's like, okay, that makes sense. That checks out. And he says, she said that you don't need to be her personal bodyguard anymore. And Yoon's like, why? And he's like, so that's how it is. Like, Hawk just sees through everything. He knows Yona. He knows it's a lie. And Jaeha's like, oh, well, it's probably this. He's like, no. He's like, there's no way she wouldn't be glad to see you. And Jaeha being like, I love that Hawk, he acknowledges, like, she loves you too. So she would want to see you no matter what. Something's happening around her. And I love the Hawk. He's like, if I can't, he's like, I'm happy to let her handle things on her own. I trust her. He's like, but if she's accused of murder, that's going to put her in a dangerous position. And I'm not just going to stand around here and do nothing. He's like, if she does, and then Yoon says, even if she says there'd be trouble if you came. And he's like, well, if she does say that, then I'll find a way to protect her from afar. So Hawk's like, I will protect her. Protect however I can. God, he's great. We all need a Hawk in our lives. And so then we cut to Yona and Soo-won. And I'm so glad she confronts Soo-won. I'm like, girl, yes. Now girl's got her stamina. She's like, knows the truth. She's like, I can confront him. And so Soo-won elaborates that he's like, no, we're going to go to war with South Kai eventually. He's like, now is the chance that we have. We have the 5 tribes connected. We need to attack them as one. He says this is the only opportunity we might get while I'm still alive. So I hate the idea that Soo-won has resigned himself to the fact that he's just going to die, right? He doesn't see any way around it. So South Kai, they have to go to war while he's alive to win. Like, he's just shouldering everything on his shoulders. He's like, if we don't do it while I'm here, it's not going to work. And it's like, Soo-won, honey, it's like, you gotta. And so I love that Ki-shuk is like, well, against South Kai, only His Majesty can bring the 5 tribes together. Aside from him, no one has that level of unifying power. And as soon as he said that, I was like, except for Yona? I was like, except for Yona? And he thinks of her, and he's like, no! He's like, why? What am I thinking? This is war. I formed an alliance to keep the dragons close to His Majesty. There are other potential successors. Why did I think of her? I'm getting anxious. It's like, no. He thought of Yona as a successor. And I think so too. I don't want Soo-won to die in this story. At least the way with the Crimson Dragon sickness, I don't want him to. However, I think that if he does have to die in the narrative for the ending to happen, then I think he's going to try to have Yona and Hawk become king and queen and take over from him. I don't think maybe he realizes he's going to do that at this point in the story, but I think down the road he's going to realize it's an option and he's going to go for it. So it's like, But him, and Yona's like, I'm going to come with you. She's like, I have no reason to hide. And she tries to ask how he is, and she's like, you're being so quiet. And she's like, I don't want you dying on me just yet. She's like, if you're suffering, I'd like you to rely on those around you. So yeah, Yona, she's like, I know you're hurting Soo-won, and she wants Soo-won to rely on others. She's like, don't be silent, talk. And like, he's just so quiet. He doesn't want to say anything because I think he's afraid that he'll break down. I think he's afraid he'll break down if he says something. And she's like, you've just got to rely on others. She doesn't say rely on me. She says rely on those around you. Because Soo-won's always been like, I can do it myself. I'll organize it. I'll map it out. It's my responsibility. And Yona's like, it doesn't have to be. You can share this burden with others. And so then Hawk has shown so much growth over the course of this series. Because Hawk, like 10 volumes ago, Hawk would have been like enraged that Soo-won was with Yona on that bridge. But he doesn't even like look twice. He sees she's okay. And then Jaeha's like, should we try to come another time? And he's like, nah, I'm getting up there. I'm getting up there. And so Soo-won goes to see the delegation. And I love that he's like, oh, well, we're going to have a funeral, right? You guys all attend, right? It's very important that you come to this person's funeral. It's a sign of good faith, right? And so I like that Ki-shuk's like, okay, the king hasn't lost his edge. He's still good. Like, Soo-won is just as planning as ever. But when he goes to walk forward, Yona's with him, and she trips on the step, and Soo-won goes to catch her, and who's there to catch her fall with Soo-won? Oh my god. I freaked out. I was like, it's Hak too. And it's so funny because Soo-won kind of leans, his body language, he's leaning in too. He can't stop her from falling, but Hak is like that steady as a rock. Hak's right there. Right there. And Soo-won's unsteady on his feet, and she's like, oh, thank you. And he grips her, and she's like, are you all right? And he's like, are you all right? And she knows it's him. She's like, why? She's like, why are you here? And Soo-won's about to fall, and that's when she grabs him to keep him steady. She's like, don't collapse now, Soo-won. There are too many soldiers here. And she doesn't want them, because then they'll go after him, thinking that he was trying to hurt Soo-won. And she's like, why'd you come here, Hak? And at first, she's like, Hak, I hope you didn't notice. And at first, I thought Hak was upset, because I thought Hak was mad because Soo-won left his side to go be by Soo-won, and I thought he was going to have this weird unrequited love panic attack because it's Hak. But no, she's like, I hope that Hak didn't notice. But Hak did notice, and he wasn't like that because of what Yona did going to his side. He was mad because Soo-won seemed so frail. Oh no. Nope. I don't like it. I'm like, I want them to talk. I want Soo-won and Hak to talk so much, but I'm afraid for it because I think it's all just gonna like come out. And so Hak basically figures everything out. He's like, something's going on. And that's when Kyuli comes after him, right? That's when he comes after him. And I thought he was gonna kill him. I thought Kyuli was gonna kill Hak. For a split second, I'm like, we're 35 volumes into this. I don't think Kusanagi's gonna kill him, but it'd be the ultimate tragedy if I thought he was going to mortally wound him. And then luckily he did not. But man, the first person to give Hak a run for his money. And we find out that Hewley, or Hewley. Someone in the comments kept saying Hewley, and I was like, no, I didn't. And I did it for the last 30 seconds. Hewley, thank you. Hewley is the one who killed Kashi. The scary thing is that Yona, she doesn't get mad at Hewley. She doesn't get mad at him, which you would think that she'd have this like horrible anger that he killed his mom, but she's read the journal. She knows everything that's led to it. She's tired. She is tired of hating people. She's like, I'm done. She's like, what good is it going to do? She's like, you killed my mother under Yuhan's orders because you did your duty. She's like, I could be mad at you, but what good is it going to do now? So, and that's a crazy, there's a little bit of a detachment there, kind of like with Soo-won and being detached, but at the same time, there's not. So it's interesting, right? And that was another thing, going back to episode 1 and 2, I didn't write it up on Whiteboard Kun, but there was a moment where Soo-won and Yona are both talking, and there's like a detachment there. There's like Il's dead body there in front of them, and they're both having this conversation, and there's like a detachment there from the violence. It's like, it's crazy, right? And Hak's like, you knew that I couldn't go free because I know about Soo-won's condition, and Hewley attacking him confirms it. That shot of Hak's eyes as Hewley like slices through his hand is really good. Like the way his eyes are portrayed, they're great. And just that pool of blood. I want to make note too, he still has the lapis lazuli. Hak still has the lapis lazuli. Our dude in this jail cell. And so Kishuk's like, he's like, well, you just captured me, but I know about Soo-won's condition. So he basically confirms everything. And what I love about this scene is that Hak's like, why am I still alive? And so he's like, well, I know about his injuries and everything. And so he's like, when he says, come on, it's not like he's got a fatal illness or something. I was like, no! I was like, Hak, don't say that! And he's like, wait, is that what's going on? And then Kishuk's like, I'm sure that would please you. But no, it won't. Kishuk thinks that Hak would be happy with Soo-won dead. But here's the thing. Hak may not be able to forgive Soo-won, but he doesn't want him dead. Not really. Not anymore. No. And God, Hak thinking it's not a fatal illness. I'm like, oh no. He's like, for some reason, Soo-won's deathly ill, and I found out, so you want me dead, right? And he's like, give me more details. Shouldn't I take it to the afterlife? Like, spill your plans, evil villain. Give me your monologue. And Ki-shuk's not going to do that. He's like, you should have stayed a foot soldier. But here's the thing. Hak is like, I haven't been paid for being a foot soldier. And he's like, I'll bury you with 100 rin. He's like, that's what a cheapskate. And he's like, I have something to say. And Hak says, please. He says, please allow Yona to be with the dragons and Yoon. He says that, he's like, they won't tell anybody. And he's like, they're the only reasons she began to smile again. And I'm begging you. His last words, Hak's potential last words on this earth was asking for Yona to be able to be around the people that made her happy. Are you freaking kidding me? My heart, Hak. And then Yona shows up and I'm like, oh, hell yeah. And Ki-shuk, she's the last person that he wanted to see. And she's like, I said, let me bye. Like, no. And Min-soo went and got her. Because Min-soo's like, no, we need to save Soo-won. And she's going to be helpful with that. But she moves past and she's like, do you really want me and the Dragon Warriors as your enemies? And I love how threatening she is. She tells Ki-shuk to choose wisely. She's like, if you want to focus on the war and you want to protect Soo-won, choose wisely here. She's like, if you get rid of Hak, you know that's going to make me beyond mad. And the dragons too. And then Hak says, send me to the front lines. Hak's like, killing me here is a waste. If you want me gone, I want to protect Koka. That is one thing we have in common. So Hak says, he's like, we all want Koka safe. Which is so insane because that's what Soo-won wants. So Hak wants the same thing that Soo-won wants. Yona wants the same thing Soo-won wants. Guys, we are getting closer to that joint mediation session where we just need to sit down and talk things out. We're getting closer there, guys. We're all coming to the affirmation that we have the same goals, everybody. And so Hak says, send me to the front lines. Send me to war. And I'll do the best I can to protect you all. And so Ki-shuk says, fine, Min-soo treat his wounds. So he has Min-soo treat his wounds, not Yoon. I kept saying Yoon in the reaction. And I love that Alec comes up to his shoulder and like perches on it like, hey, best buddy. But he sees Yona. She's so sad. And he's like, are you okay? And she's like, you're alive. I'm scared. I was scared I was too late. She was gonna go see him, even if he was dead. Girl. Like, again, tying to Soo-won, that affirmation. And he's like, I'm glad you came. And he's like, long time no see. And him smiling at her. Oh my God. Like, just these two. It's been so many volumes since we've seen them together. And they're finally together again. And it's like the most precious thing. But, oh my God. And so Yona, she's trying to figure out, she's like, how do I tell Hak? He's like, so she does explain to him that Judo had told me King Il murdered Soo-won's father. Is that true? And she's like, yes. And so Hak's like, okay, then Soo-won was taking revenge. And she's like, oh, it's not that simple. She's like, it's not that simple. She's like, he wasn't just taking revenge. She knew about this for 10 years. And so when Soo-won said he wouldn't base his decisions on me, it made sense to me. That's how he can live this way. So that Soo-won, the only way he can live is he has to detach from those he cares about to make these decisions. And Yona has realized that. So yeah, she's like, I get why he's doing this now. And I get how he was able to do it. And she's like, but how do I tell Hak that? She's like, Hak tries to choose everyone precious to him. Again, they're polar opposites. I just said this earlier, that Hak and Soo-won, they're opposites. Soo-won is on the spectrum where he can detach He can detach easily. I said that right before we started this. And Hak clings to whom he cares for. They're polar opposites. The way that they handle people they care about is completely different. But it's like a yin and yang thing, right? They're able to be like a yin and yang because they can be like this. And then he's like, oh, one last thing. And he says, sorry, I wanted to hear it from you. So he wanted to hear from Yona the truth about Il killing Yuhan. But he obviously doesn't know the full truth. But he wanted to hear it from her. And then this whole thing, give me your hand. It's like a continuation of the honey scene, just 1,000 times better. Him gripping her hand and like pulling her in to kiss her. I just want to stare at it forever. I just want to stare endlessly at these panels, and I don't think that there is a problem with that. God, I love it. He's like, I heard you don't need me to be your personal bodyguard. And I'm like, that's the thing. That's the thing. If he's not her bodyguard, then he can be her paramour. Right? He can be her king. You don't need to try so hard to protect me. Yeah, that's why he's like this whole bodyguard thing. He's like, I know exactly what you're trying to do. You don't have to do it. Oh my God. Oh, and her being like, okay. And then I love that just her holding his face in her hands and everything. God, it's so good. And she's kissing the hand that he held. Shut up. And then Kusanagi rewards us in the next chapter with that shot of them, like him with his face against hers. Oh my God. Just stop. That's the best panel. I love it so much. Excuse me while I take all of the screenshots of it. So thanks. And she's like, oh, your hand's bloody. She's like, you're bleeding. You're hurt. And he's like, oh no, I'm totally fine. She's like, She's like, Kishuk and Huli are watching. You have to hurry up and go. I love that Minsu's like, I'm going to break you up from making out because everybody else is watching. And he's like, get going. She's like, how can I not worry about you? I don't want to go with you injured. She's like, I want to get even closer to you. And I love that Hawk's like, well, saying that, I feel like I could just burst out of this prison and be with you forever. I'm like, once he gets out of that jail cell, it's going to be on, y'all. It's going to be on. Once he gets out of that jail cell, it's over. Yeah. Girl, you don't even know. I'm like, that's the thing is that Hawk has that Yuhan passion. I'm like, I want that. I don't want Yuhan's murder streak in Hawk. No, but I want that grab her and kiss her and like take her away sort of mentality. I want that, Hawk. If you could just be passionate like that, that'd be great. But yeah, he's like, I didn't say I would break out. And she's like, be careful of Huli. If he's ordered to, he'll kill without hesitation. She's like, I'm going to try and negotiate for your freedom. He's like, I can handle myself. I'll be fine. And he's like, I said I'd go to the front line because I felt that was my duty. He's like, don't worry, I'll be victorious. And Huli was listening to the whole thing. So I have a feeling down the road, especially after Yona's conversation with Huli, I don't think that he will try to kill Hawk. I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen. Pretty sure. Don't think that's going to happen. But yeah. But she's still like, he knows part of the truth now, but she's like, he said he'd never forgive Soo-won. What does he want to do with him now? That's the big question still. I don't even know. She's like, how will Hawk, Yona, she doesn't know. She doesn't know how Hawk will be around Soo-won. Right? But she tries to tell him about Huli not to kill him. I think that Hawk, if he confronts Soo-won, will be of sound enough mind that he won't try to like lunge at him and kill him. But I don't know what he's going to do. That's the big mystery box, is how is he going to handle Soo-won? And maybe we'll find out in these volumes, perhaps. I don't know. But she's like, so many people are haunted by Uncle Yuhan's ghost. I love that line. She's like, so many people like keep seeing his ghost and trying to reenact his ideals. And she's like, instead of being their own people, she's like, don't take Hawk's life. I don't want to hate anymore. I get like Blanca from Banana Fish vibes from Hewley, and I get like Ash and AJ vibes from Hak and Yona. I'm like, please don't die, one of you. No. Also, thank you for the food, Kusanagi. You knew the drought that we'd been in throughout this entire series, so you decided to give us Hawk fan service. Thank you. We'll take it. But I love that he asks if Soo-won is really, and then he stops himself. He's like, no, forget it. He's like, no. And he's in turmoil, Hawk is, because he's like, if he's, and I like this parallel where we have Hawk is like, look at this, look at the composition of this shot. You have Hawk that's like looking down in turmoil because he's like, is Soo-won really gravely, terminally ill? And he's trying to process that. And then Kishuk tells Soo-won that the Thunder Beast is in the dungeon. And I have a few things to tell you concerning the reasons. And Soo-won is just like looking down in the exact same way. And there are 2 candles lit side by side. I'm like, just go down and talk to each other, you two, please. And then I don't think it's a coincidence. The next shot we see is of a coffin. I'm like, Soo-won, before you die, you have to talk to Hawk. You have to clear the air. You just do. I want to read volume 36 so badly. Is that bad? Is that bad? But yes, we go to the funeral. I'm amazed at this point that we're like not even fully through the volume. It's amazing. And so then this girl shows up with her spunky squirrel. And Ao is instantly like, ooh. So I'm like, is this squirrel a male, a female? Ao is infatuated. If it's a girl, it's fine. But yeah. But her, the concubine, she has like a Mazari look to her where she has like the white eyelashes and everything and the blonde hair. I want to see, she seems like she had like platinum blonde hair is what I feel like she'd have. But she is instantly condescending of Yona because she knows who she is and she's jealous and wants the dragon warriors. I kept thinking there was something up with her hands, like her hands were like maybe poisonous but then she ruffled Yona's hair and nothing happened. Also, speaking of ruffling the hair, trying to shove her down to bow for Rantan. In one of the episodes, in episode 1, where Soo-won is seeing Yona again, he does the thing where she, like, when she confronts him alone right before he kills King Il, he does the thing where he runs his hand across her head and, like, does the head rubs. The same thing he did when she was a baby. Yeah. The parallels. And so Jeha, of course, stepping in. All the dragons stepping in to protect Yona. I love this spread. I love all of them. Jeha's like, I love the ladies, but I won't have you striking our Yona. And then all of them reaching out. I love that it's all of their hands. It's Jeha hands to stop hers. It's Kija's hands to protect hers. And it's Chino with his hand out. And then there's Zeno with his hand. So it's like all of their hands getting in between them. Zeno knows who she is. He called her Nyan-nyan. He knows who she is. Probably because he's been walking around seeing the Crimson Dragon King's village. So he knows her backstory. Or at least knows who she is. Which is interesting, right? And so Zeno's like, you asked us to stand in the place of the priests. So yeah, they've drove all the priests away. They can't find a priest in time for the funeral. Soo-won doesn't want a priest. So they had the dragon warriors come in to not only represent as priests, which is funny enough in its own right, but to also display their power to the South Kai army so they know what they're getting into. It's a nice little twofer that Kishuk comes up with. And I love that all the people are like, wait, they're all hot. Were they all chosen for their looks? I love that the people of South Kai, the meta commentary is there. Like, these guys are all really good looking. Was that a credential? But Lady Nyan-nyan. Oh, Nyan-nyan. That's why he calls her Nyan-nyan. That makes sense. I've been saying it wrong. She's like, do they belong to Yona? And they're like, of course. And she says, where's the Thunder Beast? And they're like, oh, he isn't one of the Dragon Warriors. But who does he belong to? And I love that Zeno goes. Zeno's like, and they're all looking at Yona. And Zeno's like, it's her. He's hers. Yeah, for real. So I'm curious about the whole Thunder Beast thing. We've talked about this in the comments quite a bit. There's a part of me that doesn't want Hawk to be part of the legend at all. But then there's another part of me that like thinks that maybe that's the route we're going, that he's like tied up, that maybe he's tied to like Shinsui, that he's tied to the South Kai legends maybe. maybe he's tied to like their divine powers over Kwoka's. I don't know. I'm curious to know what in the world Nyan-nyan's going to talk about with old Nyan-nyan, what she's going to talk about with Hak in the next volume. I'm so curious. I'm very frustrated because volume 36 is the last one we have coming out until October 4th. So this is like mid-September as I'm recording this. I'm going to want to go ahead and read volume 36 and then I have to wait. Which I'm being selfish and spoiled because you all have had to wait a lot longer than I have. So I shouldn't be complaining, but it's been nearly a year of me reading or watching Yona week per week, and this will be the first time I have a break. What is this? So it's funny. She's like, I think you've been given too much despite not being a king. It's not fair. So yeah, despite being a king. And so I love Kija's like, despite not being a king, what are you saying? She is our king. To us, she is. I love what Nyan-nyan brings to the table. She also has like the Sailor Moon buns. She looks like Serena. She looks like Princess Serenity from Sailor Moon, which I think is no coincidence. And then Soo-won shows up. I thought for a minute that she was going to try to propose to Soo-won. I thought she was going to try to offer herself to him. I thought she was going to try to like propose a marriage between him and South Kai to unite the South Kai with them. I thought that was going to be the case. Kind of like what Gobi was proposing. But no. By and large, the best thing Kishuk has ever done in this series is the ka-chop. Between her and Soo-won, it is literally the best move he's ever done. And Judo being like, oh my god. Like, it's the best. I want to take a screenshot of it because it's the best move he's done in the entire manga. And I kind of love Kishuk for it. But her, and she's pretty capable too. So just like her and Soo-won, they both have kind of a facade of being these like frail people despite their sickness, but they are really strong individuals. And she reveals that she knows about the sickness, which Soo-won didn't think any outsiders knew, which is why he reacts so crazy to it. He's like, oh. And Yona notices. I like that Yona is positioned in between them. Like we have two descendants of the Crimson Dragon King, and then we have the actual reincarnation in between the both of them. Interesting. And so from there, we see her back at the palace, and we have like she with her little she doesn't say what its name is. I want to know what the little squirrel's name is. I guess we'll find out next volume then. But all the men there, they talk about. They're like, what did they call her? She's like, I think being a tactician and getting to direct the troops at the front could be fun. To be honest, I've studied battle tactics since I was little. And they say, Lady Nyan, you're no longer a general. So she's just like Soo-won. She's studied battle tactics from the beginning, from the start of her childhood, and has worked her way up, just like Soo-won. And except now, when she confronts him, he's like, no, not interested in messing with you. She's like, they're all useless. And that's the interesting thing, too. She considers all of her subordinates and all the people with her useless. Soo-won considers them to be dear friends. So that's a big contrast between the two of them, too. I love the parallels between Nyan and Soo-won. It's great. It's wonderful. And so then, yeah, Yona and Kija. I love that Zeno and Kija and Shino were all going to grab a hold of Jaeha to go and fly off and eavesdrop. And he's like, I can't carry all of you. It's really, really cute. And Yona's like, we can't all go. So it's just Jaeha and Yona that goes, which is great. But yeah, Soo-won finally sees her. And he's like, how do you know? And she's like, I'm afflicted with it too. And she reveals that she's a relative. And she's like, my father left our clan, but he was proud of his heritage. She's like, I believed I had the Dragon Warrior's protection and that bearing the Dragon King's blood made me special. And despite that, my father and brother died in torment. And that's when Yona sees that she is like Yan-hee. Because Yan-hee lamented the same thing in her journal. She was like, I thought I was special, and now I see I don't have a purpose. And so that this is... Nyan is pretty much the same thing as Yan-hee. She's the same. She thought she had all this purpose, and now she's having an existential crisis and wants Soo-won to help, and he's like, nope. And I love that shot of the dragons. She's like, rumors reach me of a red-haired girl and the legendary dragon warriors appearing on the battlefield. And I love all the dragons are there. I still love Sheena. Sheena being the black dragon. It's great. And she's like, I wanted to see them. What in the world is this red-haired girl? You're the king. Why don't the dragon warriors belong to you? I love it. I love that panel and how Soo-won looks like. He looks like, oh, you're no different than how Il was, right? He's like, It's like, why? Because I think that Soo-won in that moment is thinking back to Il saying that you'll never become the Crimson Dragon King. And Soo-won's like, yeah, I know. He's like, what do you want to do? And she's like, I want the dragon warriors. She's like, if the Thunder Beast belongs to that girl, then I want him too. So yeah, she's the dark version of Soo-won. She is the dark version of Soo-won. She's like, I want the dragon warriors. I want Hak for myself. Yona's got to go. Like, if Soo-won had been like that, if Soo-won had been like, I want the dragon warriors, I want Hak, he could have done the same thing. But he didn't. He didn't do that. She's like, as heirs of the Crimson Dragon King, let's join forces and take control. And he's like, oh, that doesn't really interest me. Nope. And she's like, and I despise the Crimson Dragon King. Just like his mom and Yuhan. Just like his mom and Yuhan, Soo-won despises the Crimson Dragon King. Yep. And I think that's another reason why Soo-won is like, I could never marry Yona. I think that's another reason why he's like, no, because you are the Crimson Dragon King reincarnated. And I don't think that means he hates Yona. He hates what she represents. He hates that she's the reincarnation of this thing and that it's drawn her all this attention. He's like, And then we have chapter 204, which is One-Sided Affection, which I like the title of that chapter. And so Soo-won remembers exactly, and he has this pang. He's like, you were born to this bloodline. You claim the throne. You have the illness. This Crimson Dragon King must mean something to you. And she's like, only our bloodline carries the illness. She's like, it's not fair that it belongs. And he's like, I'm weary of hearing that name of the Crimson Dragon King. Clinging to it is meaningless. He's like, yeah, he knows exactly what Yona has figured out. He's like, this whole thing about the Crimson Dragon King, he's like, it's pointless. He's like, I'm tired of clinging to that. He's like, the dragons, the reincarnation, the reason I was born, I don't need any of that. And Yona at that point is like, yeah. She's like, okay, Soo-won, I can talk to him. He gets it. He kind of gets it. He doesn't realize that he gets it, but he gets it. And so she decides, I am amazed that they were going to kill her. I'm amazed that they were going to get rid of her at that moment and execute her. And she flies off in this big ruffle of robes and everything. I'm amazed they were going to kill her. And then Hewley goes to kill her and Jae-ha prevents him. Which, granted, Jae-ha's leg has to get bandaged up a lot after that from, like, striking him down. You can tell he has a little bead of sweat. Oh, God, Kusanagi draws Jae-ha so good in this chapter. He looks great. But yeah, Yona, she saves her. She's like, stop, Kishuk. And he's like, Kishuk says that Yona has a bizarre sense of mercy. So he compares Yona as having a bizarre sense of mercy. And Yona's like, no, damn it. She's like, Soo-won. And Soo-won he's like, this has nothing to do with you. And I'm so glad she grabbed him. She's like, look at me. She's like, if you don't need me or you're sick of me, meet my eyes when you talk to me. And so he does finally look at her, saying it has nothing to do with her. But I disagree. It does have to do with her. She's like, she's Cheagle's favorite. She's like, you're not thinking rationally. She's like, you're not thinking right. She's like, it's going to make things worse if you kill her. And he's like, if we end up at war, we'll have to kill her, so it won't matter regardless. And she's like, but her pain is like Lady Yeonhee's was. And that gets his attention. He's like, her pain's just like your mom's. Like, she's suffering the same thing your mom was. So killing her would be like killing your mother. You want to do that? I'm so glad she stood with Soo-won. I'm glad that she gets on his level and makes him listen, because Soo-won's not had anybody get on his level like that. And I'm just waiting for her. She's got on his level. I feel like Hawk's going to get on his level. They all need to like come together, be a trifecta, make this work, right? But she manages to get her to where she's not killed. And so they put her in the prison cell, right? I do love Jae-ha getting bandaged up by Kija and Sheena. It's not effective. They need Yoon. And so then Nyan-nyan's been in prison. So you guys, I don't know who she is. She has the same illness as Soo-won. And then Zeno says, he's like, true, but Nyan-nyan doesn't know your pain either. People can't comprehend things that they don't know. That's the thing. He's like, if it's unknown, there won't be any understanding. And so she's like, all this time I've been acting as Yona, but why has the Crimson Dragon King been reborn at this moment in time? Like, why did this happen? And I think, honestly, that part of the answer is that, like, the kingdom was at its lowest and they were going to destroy each other. And Yona's it's the chosen one mythology. It's a chosen one trope, but I really like how Kusanagi handles it. And that what I like about it is that, yeah, there is the chosen one trope with Yona, but she is in charge of her own destiny. It's like there's a destiny that seemingly surrounds her, but she's in control of it. And that's what I really like about this series, is it takes the chosen one trope and kind of makes it a little bit more layered and complex than it normally is, right? So she's like, okay, why am I here? What's my purpose? And the purpose is like to connect everybody, to all have like, to find some way for them all to come together, right? Why not? And she's like, maybe I should take her, perhaps I should take her to Nyan-nyan's. Okay, so it is a girl squirrel. Okay, they're friends. All right. And so then, of course, she uses like her sexuality to get the key from the guard. Of course she does. And so, girl takes a sword. Like, girl's not afraid to have a weapon. She's quite interesting. She, again, is like the dark version of Soo-won, right? Girl is fierce, but was she prepared to see Hak doing sit-ups? I don't think so. Ah, great, it's some weirdo. I'm like, girl, maybe she won't fall in love with Hak. Maybe she won't fall for Hak, but I'm like, it's some weirdo. Oh no. Oh no. She knows about the dragon sickness though. So is she going to tell Hak about it? Is she going to tell Hak about it? Is she going to let him free? Is she going to tell him about the sickness and confirm it? Oh no. No. I want to read volume 36 so badly. I'm trying to savor all these volumes because I know I'm nearly caught up, but I want to savor it so bad. But at the same time, I'm like, I want to savor it, but I also want to know. So it's so hard. Oh my God. It's so hard. But yeah. So what do we do? So this volume was great. This series has been no miss whatsoever, but I'm glad we're back in the swing of Yona. I'm glad that we've gotten back to this whole thing with Hak and everything, and I'm glad that they reconciled. I'm glad Hak and Yona are back together. I'm very curious to know what Nyan-nyan's going to tell him, what Nyan-nyan's going to tell Hak, how he's going to react to it, if he's going to piece. He's perceptive too. Jaeha noted he's very perceptive as well, so is he going to piece things together like Yona has? We shall see, right? But, oh my God. I'm so excited. I'm so excited for volume 36. And I hope you all are too. But I've rambled enough. I've like talked for over an hour. Surprising no one. But in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll be back next week with volume 36, baby, of Yona of the Dawn. Bye.